Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Schinder here with
Steven Schinder.
and I want to say it might be fourth or fifth time offender, Oliver Wakeman.
I think third, if I remember correctly.
Oh, really? Oh, he just makes it feel like five. Just kidding. Welcome, Oliver. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you guys?
Very good.
Starting to mix up meetings with the actual show.
Yeah,
we generally finish chatting and then talk for another 2 hours afterwards.
Yeah, it all runs together. But we've got some great stuff to cover with Oliver today. We're going to talk about a new CD, which we'll show in a moment as we talk about it. And we're also going to talk about some motion picture soundtrack stuff and the fact that he's going to be the performance and Q&A guest in our Brilliance membership site April 20th. So you want to register for that. There's a link in the post so that you can get all the information, stay up to date with all that stuff. So Steve, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so first off, today we got the announcement of, the pre-order link of your new solo album, Anam, Cara, which comes out May 17th. There's a Burning Shed link, which people can click on in the post. So you've been talking about this for the past year or so, but ideas for this album have been bouncing around for a while. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I tend to do is I'm always writing, and I'm not the sort of artist that writes 12 songs and then goes, there we go, that's an album, and shoves them out. I tend to write songs, and then they either find a home or they don't. And what happens is I generally sort of magpie things around and put them into a little playlist and think, well, that's a nice idea for that sort of record. And for this record in particular, I wanted a female vocalist. So it was sort of songs that I'd written from a female point of view, or songs that were particularly suited to a female voice. And it started many, many years ago. I came up with a couple of songs and a couple of ideas and started working with a singer called Rachel. But the project never really went anywhere. And we recorded a few of the tracks in a sort of a basic form. And then what happened was obviously it was supposed to be my album that I was going to do after... I think it was after the Mother's Ruin record, about 2007, I think it was. And then I got the call to join Yes, and so sort of disappeared off doing that for 3 or 4 years. And then started working with Gordon Giltrap, and so wrote the Ravens and Lullabies record with him. And then following that record, there was a couple of years gaps of lots and lots of sessions. And then I ended up doing the From a Page Yes record. Right. Which took quite a bit of time to pull together, as you can imagine. And then it was then I suddenly got lots of people going, oh, we haven't heard this album for a while. So then I got involved in all the box set reissues, and so that sort of took up a load of time with a load of other sessions as well. And then I got to 2023 or 2022, late 2022, and I was talking to my management, and they said, we need a new record from you. It's been too long since we've had a new record. And so I've got this record I really want to do. It's like a Celtic rock prog thing. And they were like, oh, it sounds interesting. So we talked about it and went through a few iterations of how it could work. And they gave me the green light to get started on it. And so then it was the sort of looking at these sort of collections of songs that I'd written over the years for this project. And I did that traditional thing of thinking, oh, great, it's pretty much done. And then started to go into the music and actually realized that actually it wasn't done by any stretch of the imagination. So I sort of pulled everything apart, rewrote an awful lot of it, and then was lucky enough to sort of choose some wonderful musicians to play on the record. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And so it sort of then just took on a life of its own, and did that usual thing with records where you think, oh, it probably won't be too tricky. I seem to remember that writing records isn't too tough. And then you get into the weeds and you suddenly realize that it's actually an awful lot more work than you remember. I think it's a bit like children. You have a child and then about 3 or 4 years later you go, oh, I don't think it was that bad, actually. And you sort of forget all the sleepless nights and stuff you go through. I think it's a bit like that with records. You start, write another record. And then you get into it, you suddenly go, oh yeah, I remember why we don't do these that often.
Well, it's also, you make a really neat analogy with having a child, because they say that childbirth for women is the quickest pain you forget.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you go through all that, gestating it, creating it, recording it, mixing that, all that. And then after all that anguish is over with, like you said, you look back, it's like, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it is. It's true, but and then you have the difficulty of living with it for a while because it's mixed and it's finished, and then you suddenly go, oh God, you have to give it a bit of time away, and then you come back and go, you can listen to it. I listened to it today, actually. I hadn't listened to it for a few weeks, and my wife and I went out for a walk in the countryside, and we took the record and listened to it in the car, and it was like, oh, it's actually really nice to listen to it as a listener rather than constantly critiquing and thinking, well, what have I got to change next? So that was really good today. So that's where the record came from originally, and the title Anam Cara has been around for a long time. It's depends where you read it. Some people say it's early Irish, and some say it's Middle Irish, but it technically translates into soul friend. Is what it means. And it seems like it's not a concept album as such, but it's an album of it's an album that has a sort of theme to the whole record. It's all about that relationship between people. So there's lots of I sort of call them short stories or vignettes about different types of relationships and things within people, and little short stories. So that's really where it comes from.
Nice. The cover's beautiful. Talk about the cover. Who came up with that and who put it together?
There's a very, very good friend of mine called Anne Sudworth. She is the most amazing artist. Well, I say the most amazing artist because then it makes it sound like all the other artists I work with aren't. One of the amazing artists that I've been lucky enough to work with, I work with Rodney Matthews, who's also the most amazing artist, and Roger Dean, who's also the most amazing artist.
He's all right. It's gorgeous, though. It really is. It's very enchanting looking, and it makes me want to listen to the music. Just like if that was a book cover, I would want to dive in.
Yeah, she also did the cover for my 3 Ages of Magic record back in 2003. 2003? I think it was about
2001, maybe
2001.
Early 2000s, somewhere around there.
Thanks.
He's real good with this stuff. He's like a date lexicon. And Oliver, regarding the cover, did the two of you collaborate? Did she have music to work off?
No, it's really odd. She I talk to Anne quite regularly. She doesn't do album covers or many album covers or anything like that. She just basically does her own work for what she wants to do. And she has lots of sort of A-list film stars that go and buy her work. And back in the early 2000s, I saw a picture of hers on the internet, and I was obviously feeling particularly brave. Maybe it'd been a bottle of Budweiser too many or something, and I wrote to her website and I just said, I'm doing this record, and I think you've done a piece of artwork that would be superb for the front cover. Could I use it? And she said, for some reason, she said yes. And she's never said yes to anybody else. So she said yes. And then we met up and we became really good friends, and we catch up at least once a year. And, she sends little prints to my kids for their birthdays and stuff. And so she's a lovely person. And then when it came to doing this record, I've got her books on my back shelf, and I'm always going through her artwork. And I came across this piece of work, and I thought, oh, that is particularly beautiful. I particularly loved the coloring of it and the fairy.
Yeah.
And thought that, I said to my wife, I said, that would be brilliant for the cover. And then I went to Anne and I sort of said, look, there's a piece of artwork of yours I'd really love to use. And she just straight away said, yeah, of course you can. And it was like, wow. So it's only
too easy.
it was just, it's lovely. And artwork is so important to me on a record because it really sets the tone of the record. It really sets the feel that you're going to get from the music. And this album cover did that for me. She's done some wonderful artwork for the inside cover as well. And great. She's just phenomenal. Anybody go out there, have a look at Anne Sudworth's work, and it is just amazing. It's a lot of pastel work. The detail for pastel is remarkable.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I was very, very lucky that she let me use some more artwork of hers on the cover. Yeah, but she's amazing. And the odd thing about it is I found this picture in one of her books, and then I was looking through her other books because I've got books at the back because I'm very lucky. Obviously, I've got lots of musician friends, but I'm very good friends with Peter Brukownik, who's done covers for me, and Rodney Matthews, who I've worked with for many years, and Roger Dean, obviously, who's I've done the Yes work with.
Right.
And I've got Anne's books, so I've got all their art books behind me. And I found another of her books, which I was looking through, which I hadn't looked through for a while. And oddly enough, the picture that I used for 3 Ages and the picture for Anam Cara were on the facing pages. I literally opened the book and they were both there next to each other. And it was
wow.
well, how perfect is that? You know, that was
Yeah.
a real serendipitous moment.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. That's actually pretty remarkable if you think about it.
It is.
So have you looked at the artwork on the back of either of those pages to see if that might fit a
No, I should
future
do,
album?
shouldn't I? I should find the next couple of albums.
Yeah, that's great. And you'll be performing some of the material from this with a band on Sunday, April 14th, which I can't believe how right around the corner that feels, right?
Tell me about it. It's terrifying. I've got a
Yeah,
piano
at
here covered in
Winters
music,
End.
which I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, time just that's at Winters End Prague Rock Festival and Chepstow Drill Hall. How much of this album can we expect?
We're going to do about 4 songs from this album, and we're doing the 4 songs from a page. But we're going to do the Turn of a Card track. We're going to do in the style that we did for the Ravens and Lullabies record, which is where it originated. Well, it didn't originate, but it originated with Yes, but then got arranged for Ravens and Lullabies. There's a whole history behind that track. So we're going to do those tracks. It was a bit sort of odd, really, because Stephen Lamb, who organizes the festival, phoned me up last year and said, you know, would you headline a show? Because I headlined the show with Gordon Giltrap many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it'd be great if you could come and do it. And he said, and would you play from a page? And I said, yeah. I said, but I don't want to do just a Yes set. I don't want to do a set full of Yes music. If I'm going to do some stuff, I'll do from a page.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, what else are you doing? And I said, well, I'm working on this project and it's called Anam Cara, and I don't know whether it's, you know, it's a band or it's me or whatever. It ended up being my sort of solo record, but it's got sort of such a nice tight band on it. I sort of think of them as my band for this record. And so it sort of got promoted as Oliver Wakeman's Anam Cara plays from a page. So it's a bit convoluted.
Oh, wow.
But it's essentially we're playing some tracks from the new record. It was a good opportunity to tell people there's a new record coming out and play some of the Yes stuff, which people would want to hear. And then there's a load of stuff in the back catalogue that we're going to throw into the mix as well. A couple of tracks from Jabberwocky and Hound, and
nice
bits from 3 Ages, and some other tracks are in the Ravens record. So it's going to be a fun show, but it's quite a lot to learn. You again, like, you know, doing shows when you're out there touring and playing shows night after night after night, it's all under your fingers. But when you do one-off headliners, it's a lot to learn and get under your fingers quite quickly. So it's so the piano is just they're covered with sheet music and things.
Yeah. Is there a chance this show could go on the road and maybe even come to North America?
Oh, we would love it to. It's just going to depend on how the album does. If the Anam Cara album does well and people buy it and there's a good response to it and there looks like there's audiences, then I will take it wherever people want to hear it. But
that's great. Well, here's someone, Diane Kelly, who wants to see it in Atlanta. So you got to start.
There we go. That's one person in the audience. We're there. We're up and running.
Yeah, Steve will see it in LA. I'll see it in Phoenix. And that would really, it sounds like a great set. That combination of all that music is very well rounded.
It will be. I've got a very good band as well. I'm very lucky. The musicians that I've got Hayley Griffiths is my vocalist for this show, and she plays on the record. She's a wonderful singer, and the reason I chose Hayley for the record was because she'd done a lot of, I'd worked with her before, but she did a lot of the singing on the original Riverdance and the Lord of the Dance shows. She was one of the vocalists on that, so she has a really good sort of Celtic ability. But she's also a rock singer, and she's also a soprano, so she's singing classical as well. And the way that I write music, which tends to be a little all over the place, having somebody that can hit notes and then suddenly change style quickly is fantastic. So she's one, and I've got Oliver Day doing the guitars. Some of your listeners might remember him from doing the Fragile Yes tribute band, and he's a remarkable player. He does all the acoustic stuff on the record, but he's doing all the guitars on the show. But no, he was terrific. You know, we were coming up with things, and I'd written all these sort of keyboard lines. I said, I want these on a guitar, and he's like, well, he said, I've got a lute. We could probably do part of it on a lute and part of it on a mandolin. So he ripped out mandolins, lutes, tenor lutes, lap steels, you know, and anything we can get our hands on, he plays if it's got a string. So yeah, so it's fantastic. So he's playing as well. So it's yes, it's a very good band. I've got Dan Nelson from Magenta playing bass, and Scott Hyam, who was from the band Pendragon, playing drums for me as well. So a phenomenally good band playing live. And then on the record, I've got Troy Denockley from Nightwish doing all the whistles and Ilian pipes. My friend Robert McClung from the rock band Telegies doing all the violins, and a chap from England called Mick Allport, who I don't think has done a major amount of recording, but he's a phenomenal sax player. He's done some wonderful sax and clarinet on the record as well. So it's been an album of just being able to use lots and lots of different sounds and pull lots of different styles of music together. It's been great fun. I mean, it's been terrific.
Yeah, and one of our viewers really likes the
That's
concept.
great. I really hope it comes.
Yeah. Sorry, here's delay or?
Yeah, just a little. Sorry. Robert Nasir says, great to see Oliver on the show. Thank you for this. Anam, Cara, soul friends, soulmates can. Spirits is such beautiful and power again. Yeah. What's the date of the release again?
It's pre-release is out today, so it can be pre-ordered today, and it's coming out on May the 17th.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is great because it's day before my dad's birthday, so that's his present sorted.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
are you gonna
oh, sorry,
Steve, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's gonna be great, like you being able to play this music at the festival. Also, like you said, from a page, like how does it feel finally bringing the from a page material to the live setting after all this time?
Yeah, complicated.
Oh, really?
Well, it brought back a lot of memories as to how complex Yes music was, and it's not so much in the parts that you play sometimes that are complex, although they can be a little tricky. It's the intertwining of the parts and how you have to play your part, sort of listening to what the other person's doing whilst not being distracted by what's the other person's doing, because you can often be cross rhythms or playing against each other. Yeah. So that is the hardest bit. And but Oliver
I'm sorry, Oliver, what's a song that would be most challenging in that area?
It depends really on the type of song. I mean, Gift of Love is challenging because it's quite long. And it does a lot of repeating of themes in different keys. So you've sort of got to get it into your head and try and remember all these different keys. And also there's an awful lot of layered keyboards and an awful lot of layered guitars on that. So trying to strip it back to actually work with a 5-piece band is quite tricky. So that will be interesting to do. Words on a Page is not tricky as such to play. It's the intricacies that's tricky with that. It's getting the acoustic guitar and the piano to just intertwine perfectly, which is so that has its own challenge. And then you have something like To the Moment that has a lot of parts where we all sync up into different bits. You know, Oliver and I were playing together the other day. We just did a quick online thing together, and we were sort of doing the final chorus and the keyboard solo and that whole part at the end where it all joins up and syncs together, and we sort of got that together and thought, okay, that's good. So there's different challenges that come from it. And there's another section in the middle of To the Moment where the keyboard's sort of doing it's like a lot of finger swapping, and all the fingers swap in different orders. So it's not just a you sort of unders and then your seconds, and then you're suddenly starting on your third. So there's a lot of that going on. And in the background, you've got Oliver going, and your brain's trying not to get pulled into one direction. Keep it together. And it suddenly reminded me of all these times when we used to play things like Close to the Edge and stuff, and you're sort of going, God, this rings. But then it, in an odd way, it sort of made me go, oh, actually, that's interesting because that's what Yes makes you do. It makes you write like that. It makes you write this counter melody stuff going on all the time. And that's, so it's challenging in lots of different ways. But
that's awesome. Fun. And if you get, if it ever becomes too challenging, just do what your dad has done for years and just mime to recordings. Just kidding, everybody. Just kidding. Here's a comment from a viewer. Kevin says, "Love to the moment."
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
That's a great song. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Yeah. And speaking of, or go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of your dad, last year you guys and other amazing musicians were involved in called the Other Coronation Concert. And you'll be doing another one, the Mile of Roses charity concert I think that's in June. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, what happened was a couple of years ago, we decided to do a charity concert for a couple of schools. One school that was close by to us, another one that was a school for special needs children. And so we did that came up with this idea. And it was going to originally be my dad and I just doing it together. And then we got involved with a theatre called the Roses Theatre, who in Tewkesbury, which is quite an old, picturesque British sort of, I suppose, sort of how a lot of people would imagine a British medieval type city to look, or Tudor city to look, lots of beams and stuff, very picturesque place. And they've got a lovely theatre there, and they said that they would put the show on. And then we sort of talked about Dad and I talked about how we were going to do the set, and then we sort of talked about other people that could do it. And I got Gordon Giltrap involved, and Carrie Martin came along, a lovely singer. And that show was the only date they had free was the date of the King's coronation in the UK, and they were already doing a big coronation concert called the Coronation Concert, unsurprisingly enough. And we thought, oh well, what can we do? So I inventively came up with the title of the Other Coronation Concert, and that's how it sort of came as a joke, and then it became the title of the concert. So we did that show, we sold it out. Rodney Matthews came along and we auctioned off some of his artwork, and it was great, and we raised quite a lot of money for the schools. And then this year we're doing it again for the special needs school. Basically, we said that we should do it again, and actually his dad and I were bowing at the end of the show. He said, "Oh, we should do this again." So
that's great.
My memory's appalling, but sometimes it's pretty good. And I remembered when I saw him last time, I said, "Dad, you said you'd do another one. Do you want to do it?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll go on." So he said, "We'll do one more." And this one's for the school, which is called the Milestone School. And then it's also for the Roses Theatre themselves. So that's why the Mile of Roses came from as a title. Oh. So that's going to be similar to last year's, although this show will involve me playing a lot more across the sets. Last year, we sort of did individual sets with just very little, a couple of little accompaniment sections. Yeah. But this year, I'll do some songs with Dad. I'll play a bit with Gordon. I'll play with Carrie, and Carrie will probably play with me and my set as well. So, it'll be a development of last year's show, but it should be good fun. I mean, they're great fun. They sold out. It sold out last year quite quickly, and I think we're nearly 3/4 sold out already. And we only announced it a couple of weeks ago. So.
That's awesome. And here's some more comments on your work. Dan also says, "I love 3 Ages."
3 Ages. Oh, thank you very much. Yes, that was a great fun album to do. It was recorded in an old barn in if you know England at all, the pointy bit at the bottom on the left-hand side is down in Cornwall, which is real sort of fairy folklore. Celtic land, as well as sort of the Irish and the Scottish. That Cornwall has the same sort of folklore to it, and I recorded it there there was a farm, and they'd recorded this. They'd started to build a studio in this barn, huge, great barn, and their plan was to build a studio. So they built a control room in the middle, and then they were going to refurbish all the rooms that were around this control room. And they said, "Oh, come down, it'll be sorted, it'll be brilliant." And I turned up, and the control room was pristine and beautiful, and every other room was like a barn. And I said, what happened to all the rooms? And they said, "We found bats. And in England, the bats are protected, so you can't move them." So they couldn't do any of the building. But he said, "But are you still okay to record?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" So we set up keyboards and guitars all over the place in all these rooms. Had a big Leslie speaker for the Hammond organ just sitting in the middle of this massive barn, and recorded it there. It was wonderful. And I always remember I had it was before I didn't use a Moog on the record. I used an old Yamaha CS1 single oscillator keyboard, which and what I did is I double tracked it to make it sound like it had two oscillators, detuned it the second time. I played the same solo twice. But when I was doing that solo, the sound engineer said to me, he said, there's something wrong with your keyboard. And this, obviously, this barn is in the middle of a massive, great dairy farm. And he said, something wrong. Every time you're playing it, he said, we keep getting a click, keeps coming through. And I went, well, it's odd. It doesn't normally do that. So we kept going on it. And then we found out that it was actually the voltage from the electric fence that was keeping the cows in the field from escaping that was actually coming through on the voltage through the keyboard.
The electric fence, basically.
Yeah, basically. So what they said to me, he said, look, we can turn off the electric fence for about a minute before the cows will try to escape. So you've got to nail the solo in one. Or
that's hilarious.
So I actually had to turn off all the electric fences for this farm so I could get my solo done. It was great.
That is, yeah, I bet the acoustics of the barn having been left as is were probably pretty good, right? With all that old wood, and was it just a hard dirt floor? Maybe
it was beautiful. It was so much fun. It was such a lovely environment to work in as well.
That's neat.
Yeah,
it's also funny that we always say old barn. I don't think anyone's building any new barns that I know of, right? I can't picture a new barn. They're all old barns.
Yeah, particularly over here. Yeah, they're all old barns. It's lovely. But it was just something really lovely about going to work in the countryside, just driving through the middle of nowhere, down into the valley, finding an old farmstead and sitting there and recording music. It was lovely.
That's awesome. I love that kind of drive. I want to show, here's kind of a longer comment, but let's go ahead and put it on the screen. Robert also says, Oliver, your respect for Yes and your willingness to present the Yes music you've created during a period in which membership decisions may have been pragmatic and less than just is inspiring. It cannot be overstated the importance of having some examples, let's say, of graciousness in progressive rock. Thank you for this. That's a really good point. I think there's a reason why, stereotypes are built on reality. I think that's fair to say. Stereotypes are built on some degree of reality. And I think we all know that, especially before YouTube and all of that, when people couldn't really get that peek beyond the curtain of musicians of any genre of music, people in the area of progressive rock, fusion, musos were looked at as, well, they've got to be snooty. So when we see, all these wonderful layers and traces of humility, it means a lot, because it bursts that sometimes shadowed bubble that people have of people in certain genres of music, just like in film, or anything like that they didn't realize before. So that indeed is really cool. That's nice.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, no, it's I just there was two ways of playing that situation, which was get angry or look at it and go, well, that was a great opportunity.
Yeah,
I got to do an awful lot of wonderful things that a lot of musicians don't get to do, and be thankful for it, and then build something from that. And I think, taking that approach helped me get to do the From a Page project. So many years later, it allowed me to do something that maybe, had it played out a different way, wouldn't have been so appealing to the other guys. But, it was when I did when I worked on the From a Page stuff, I was talking to the management, who also my management and Yes's management. And they said, I think you need to come down and talk to Steve, So I went down to Steve's house and sat there and played in the music. And it was like old times, it was like years had just disappeared. And we just sat there. And then we started talking about loads of other stuff and was chatting away. And we chat every now and then. And every now and then he'll just drop me an email and say, hey, let's have a call, or I'll give him a call out of the blue. And we catch up like we used to. It's things happen in life. I'm not very good at being angry. I'm not really not really an angry person, and I find it a lot of issues or things that come out for me, or problems or things that annoy me, tend to come out in song. And I generally write a story around something.
Mhm.
Every musician writes something, and you always tend to write from a personal perspective because something's happened to you, and then you write, and that's how I deal with it. It's like cathartic. You write music, and it helps you, put your thoughts out there that may be a bit non-identifiable to other people, but it allows you to get your thoughts and your feelings out.
Yeah.
And I find that a much more creative way of dealing with things that are maybe difficult or uncomfortable situations.
That's a great point. I've been a fan of Phil Collins since before he became Genesis's lead singer, and listening to his autobiography a couple months ago on Audible was just so revealing to exactly like that point. Like, oh, this song's about that situation. This one's about her.
Yeah.
This one's about himself and his own little mishap. He was very, very open about it in the book. I don't know if you've read it or heard it, but
No,
and there were moments where it seemed like he was kind of self-conscious and shy about certain things in his career,
yeah, very. He couldn't have been more. I don't think he couldn't have been more open and just putting himself out there. It's really interesting. So what you just said reminds me of that. And like you said, the listener, the fan, often doesn't really know, which song is a song for the sake of a song, which one is an emptying out of emotions in that way, rather than, like you said, being angry. And when we show gratitude for things, we get more of what we're showing gratitude for. And that's exactly what happened with From a Page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just noticed your T-shirt spells out Cara.
Oh, does it?
The middle four letters.
Oh,
I thought you'd done it deliberately.
Oh yeah, his shirt, for those listening, says sarcasm, and it's like on a periodic table style. Yeah, the letters that are in Cara are on that.
I could just see the CA and the RA, and I thought,
sarcasm may occur periodically. There you go. If you don't believe me, just ask me, or ask my wife, or ask Steve for that matter.
Yeah,
that was me thinking you'd done it deliberately.
Yeah, and you also mentioned Rodney Matthews, with whom you collaborate with now and then. Is there anything you've been working on with him recently or upcoming that you're able to talk about?
Yeah, we're working on two things, three things, four things. The fourth one.
That was Monty Python right there.
Oh, I was thinking like it's not like a children's book. I loved it.
He just phones me up every now and then, and so basically we're working on we did Trinity a few years ago, which was an album with Jeff Sheets, a wonderful guitarist, and we're going to do a follow-up to that. So Jeff started writing for that. I've started writing for that. So we are doing that as another big project. There will be a follow-up to the Endor film that I did the soundtrack for him a few years ago. He's doing another Yendor film, so I'm going to do the soundtrack for that. And then we're doing another CD one-track thing for something. But then the thing that I'm working on at the moment is for a project called Squid, which was his band from the 70s. Basically, before Rodney was well known for an artist, he was a drummer in prog bands back in the 60s. He played at Glastonbury and did quite a lot of stuff. And then he had to make a choice between music and art, and he obviously went down the art route. And then for many years, he always wanted to get back into doing drumming. And so we did Trinity and things. And then he said to me, I've got these recordings that the band did back in the 70s for a radio show. They never got signed, but they recorded a few tracks. And he said, I'd really like to do these and write some new stuff into these songs and bring them, get them redone. So I've been working through all these old tapes and recordings and re-recording a load of these parts and trying to work out the songs and writing new sections for it. And so we're doing that. Rodney's in the studio tomorrow, actually doing the drums for one of the tracks. So that's been really, really good fun, because it's been lovely to, go back to just being Hammond, Moog, and piano like it was 70s again. So it's been good fun. So we're doing that at the moment. So that'll be good fun. So that's the next thing that will come out from Rodney Rodney's world.
That's neat. Kind of bringing it back in time as far as the
Mm.
soundscape with the instruments you're using, right?
Yeah, and we would, and we're writing new music for it. But of course, I want to write in the style of how the original band was. And it's one thing I actually really enjoy doing. It, when I wrote the stuff with Yes, I tried to write stuff that I felt would be in keeping with how Yes would write music and the sort of things that they would bring to the table. So the songs that I brought to the table with Yes were songs that I felt were Yes like in composition. So it's good fun to go and write in a certain way. So I'm looking forward to this, sort of not being constrained by only using 3 or 4 instruments, but thinking of it as how you would have had a setup in those days, rather than something like 3 Ages, where I just surrounded myself with as many different things that had flashing lights on as possible, and randomly hit them.
Programming and all that.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that those instruments are still just so relevant,
Yeah, well, they're good fun to play. I mean, they are just, there's an identity that you get from those instruments. I always will love a Moog because, it's part of my heritage is Dad playing with Moogs, and I love my little Moogs that I've got. But Hammond organs are just wonderful. It's just a tremendously, what's the best way of putting it? Guitars look interesting and cool. They look great. Guitars look interesting and cool. Keyboards often don't. They sometimes keyboards. I've got a little. Get my camera right. There's a Kronos in the background there, which is a cool Kronos.
Right.
It's the special edition red version, which makes it look a little bit different. And they look nice. And my white piano down here, which is my Dexabel piano, looks really nice. It's unusual. But in general, there was a period of time where keyboards were just flat black things.
Yeah.
With black and white keys.
Real utilitarian looking.
Yeah, with guitars, you'd get like all these different paint jobs.
Yeah. Vanity instrument like drums.
Yeah. And what I liked when I went out with Yes as well, I did it deliberately, was every keyboard on that rig had a role, so there were a couple of synths that did synth roles. There was a big workstation that did a sort of workhorse of a lot of stuff, but there was a dedicated piano that did piano and Rhodes, and then there was a organ that just did the organ bits, and then there was a Moog, and there was a little vocoder, and they all had specific roles to try and allow me to sort of play in the style of the music of the era of Yes that we were playing at that particular time. And I'm a big fan of that. And I know a lot of people go out now with one keyboard and a laptop, and that's great if that works for a lot of people. But I've sort of come from this world of playing. I've only ever taken a laptop out once, and that was purely because there was a nicer piano sound in the laptop that I just played through to the piano, because it was a nicer piano sound than I had in the keyboard. That was all I did it for. But I admire a lot of these keyboard players that can go out and they have all these samples and fires and things that they're firing off all the time. And I remember many years ago, there was a show we did with Yes, and we played a festival. And it was quite a big festival. I can't remember how many thousands of people. It was 10,000 people or something. And we played on this stage. And next to us was this huge arena. And we finished the show, and we looked to the side, and there was a load of people stood by the side of the stage, and we didn't recognize them. Who's that lot? And one of the tour manager or somebody said it was the X Factor were in the arena next door. One of these Pop Idol things, one of those sort of reality things.
Yeah.
And they'd finished and come over to watch a bit of the Yes show, a couple of the artists. And they spent the entire time sort of apparently going, where are the other musicians? Are they under the stage? They couldn't believe that it was just the 5 of us.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
And it just showed the difference in that sort of approach of musicianship. And there's, I don't have anything, it's not a criticism of how other people work. Other people do how they work in the way that they have to do certain songs and certain pieces of music. You couldn't do it like that, but it was just that difference in approach and styles to doing things. So I've always been a little bit slightly, maybe make my life harder than it needs to be. I could probably make it a lot easier, but I'm a bit of a player. My keyboard tech people always say to me, what do you think of this keyboard? And it's like, I switch it on, and if the sounds make me want to write, then that's great.
Then
if they don't, I move on. I'm not really a techie, sit down and program lots of different sounds. I've probably done a couple in my life, probably a couple in my Moog, which is a bit more fun. But I
Right.
tend to be more of a player that gets inspired by something, and then I tend to go off on this little meandering path until a song comes out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of players, some of them do wonderful things with sounds that I could never even think of. That's what makes us all different. We all do everything. Everybody does things differently.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
each have our own way of working. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a story I'm going to ask you to tell. I hear what hopefully won't be a dog emergency. I'm going to disappear for a minute. But Glenn says, always enjoyed the story about Oliver and Dad's autographs. Why don't you talk about that? And I will be back.
Autographs. This is. I imagine this is along the lines of that they look quite similar. I did
Well, I've heard I've heard one story of how you helped I don't know if this is the same person or someone else, but how you helped someone get an autograph from your dad. So I don't know if that refers to that or what you think it might be, but yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Can Glenn, maybe Glenn can elaborate about which story I should tell.
Right. Yeah, I don't know, but I guess just whatever comes to mind.
Well, there is because I've done a lot of Yes records which I've signed over the years, and people have commented that Dad's signature and my signature aren't too dissimilar.
Oh.
And there is a reason. I did my signature. I worked my signature out when I was 8 years old. I did my signature and decided to stick with it. And the reason I did the signature in a similar sort of style was because my dad had told me a story that he had copied his signature from his dad, and he had done a version of his dad's signature. So basically my granddad's signature, my dad copied and made a variation of it for his signature. And so I thought at the age of 8 or 9, whenever it was when you first start trying to do this intro, I thought, oh, well, that'd be really nice if granddad did the signature and then dad did it similarly. That would be nice if I do something, a variation of it again, and we keep the same signature going down through various generations. So it's
neat.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people just probably look at it and go, oh, he's just copied his dad. It wasn't. It was actually a nice sort of family story behind it that I thought was quite good. My son's been coming up to me recently saying, how do you do it, Dad? So I think at some point he's going to probably
he's onto it.
Adjust his to be the same.
Okay, yeah. Glenn says, yes, he signed something your dad signed, and they looked similar. That's the story you told. Thanks.
Yeah, he has a double loop on the W. I don't do the double loop. I just do. Oh, I think he has 3. I only do 2. And I think if you look at the O, my O sort of has the loop on the inside. He does his R with the loop on the outside, and my granddad did it. My granddad was Cyril, so he did a C, so he did the big loop as well. So anyway, that was the story that my dad told me back when I was a kid, and that's why I thought I'd keep it going. So that's the story behind the signatures.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I want to show another comment. Dogs are okay, by the way. We have 3 pretty good sized dogs, and my wife has customers coming in and out for what she does. And sometimes one of them goes off and then it's a domino effect. It just sounded a little too crazy. So I had to peek. Peter says, looking forward to Oliver's new album. I wonder which track or moment on it turned out the best or closest match to what Oliver imagined. That's an interesting question. And were there any huge surprises far from what you imagined that you ended up being very happy with?
Yeah, there's one song which I'd always really liked. There's a track called Here in My Heart off the record. And it was originally written as a sort of a Celtic refrain, really. It sort of did a very similar sort of rolling melody that went through the piece of music. Mm-hmm. And I wrote 5 or 6 verses doing this in a sort of canon way. And it was just like a little riff section, then this verse canoning. And then as I started to work on the music for it, I started to develop it more. And the music got more and more intricate. And then I bought violins, and my friend Robert did some wonderful violin stuff on it. And then it was like, okay, and then what about if we bring some drums in? And then so the drums came in and we built it up more. And then Troy did some Ilian pipes that we put at the beginning. And then it was like, okay, and then the pipes can come back in. Actually, I need a solo now. So then I switched on the Moog, and I remember it was a one take one night. I did this solo and thought, oh, that's all right, I'll keep that. And then suddenly the music became much more than the song originally was supposed to be. And we got to the album, we finished it. I'd had it mixed with Haley singing the original vocal line to it, and we were a few days away from the master, and I remember sort of sitting listening to the album and thinking, something's not right, something's not quite right here. And it reminded me of a story that I told about John Wetton. John and I were very good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And people often say to me, a question you often get asked is, did he give you advice? Yes, he gave me lots of advice. But one piece of advice that he never gave me that I just took from the way he wrote was that he was annoyingly good at writing verses. His verses were almost as good as his choruses. You listen to one of his songs and you sing along with it from start to finish. Whereas, my wife played me a song today by somebody famous from the 80s, and I listened to it and she said, do you know this song? And I listened to it and I thought, I've never heard this before in my life. The verse was instantly forgettable. And then it got to the chorus and I went, oh yeah, I probably have heard this somewhere along the line, because you only remembered the chorus.
Right.
John Wetton always had this ability to write verses that were so brilliant.
Yeah.
And that has always been in my head whenever I've written music. I've always gone, is that verse good enough? Does it build to the chorus? Does it have the right feeling of melodic development? Is it catchy? Does it make people want to sing along? Does it tell a story? It's a whole raft of things that you do when you write a piece of music. I always liken it to crafting an owl out of a piece of wood. I can take a piece of wood and chip away at it and make it look a bit roughly like an owl, but it takes somebody to craft it to make it really look like an owl. And I find the same thing with music. I do it all, audibly, sort of. I'm crafting music to make it sound right. And so I always have this thing in my head that, I've got to make the vocals right. And it suddenly struck me when I was listening to this pre-master version and went, it's not that I don't like the vocal anymore, but the vocal didn't develop in the way that the music had developed. The vocal had stayed static, whereas everything musically had developed and developed.
Oh, interesting.
And I suddenly went, I think I'm going to have to make two very uncomfortable calls here. One which is to the record company, and one which is to Haley. So, Haley, I'm afraid I need you to re-sing it. She said, what is it? A couple of words? You need a couple of different notes? I said, no, I've rewritten it. And I spent a couple of days going, right, I'm going to rewrite it. The words were similar because the story was still the same, but it needed to develop more. And that is quite scary, doing that close to the end of a record when you've lived with a piece of music for a long time, because you kind of have to take a bit of a chance and actually go, I could get this horribly wrong,
right,
or this could turn out to be you. And then you just have to get to a point where you go, do you know what? You've been doing this long enough now. You have to trust when you think something isn't right. You have to trust it. And so I trusted it. And I listened to it in the car when we were driving out today. And I said to my wife at the time, I said, every time I hear that song, I go, I'm so glad I changed the vocal line. And,
that's awesome.
Yeah. And so that piece of music is particularly special for that, because it's, it was exactly right. It was the right decisions to make. And Haley, bless her, she just went, yeah, all right. And she sent it back to me and it sounded wonderful. She sang it absolutely beautifully.
That's great. Before we go on to the new movie soundtrack question, how about the part of Peter's question? Which song came out closest to how you envision the whole thing? Any?
I think they probably all did, or they sort of exceeded what I wanted them to do, because you write them and they're telling a story, and the story is important. But then when people, what's the best way of putting this? When I write, I tend to be a bit, I'm not going to say control freak, but I tend to write, when I write a piece of music, I'm writing a lot of the parts for people. So I'm writing a lot of the pipe parts. I'm writing a lot of the violin parts. And I'm writing a lot of the obviously vocal lines and the guitar bits and stuff. And so I tend to write a lot of these bits, or because I'm producing it as well, I'm working closely with people to make sure I get what I want.
Yeah.
And what is always wonderful for me is it's about the musicians that you have. It's not about getting them to be able to perform exactly what you wanted identically. It's about them doing that little bit that extra 10%, that they give you 90% of what you want, which would be perfect. But then they do that bit that they do because they are experts in their craft.
Yeah.
And they do something that make you go, oh, brilliant. I'd never have thought that's what you've just done there. You know, Haley does a couple of things where she sings a line in an emotive way that I would never get being in a guide vocalist. You know, I would never have been able to get across that thing. And you're trying to direct what you want. And she sends you something back and you go, oh, that's better than I can have imagined. And Oliver Day would often, at the end of a take of a load of stuff that I wanted, he'd say, oh, and there's a couple of minutes of noodling away. And I'd go through all these noodles and go, that's beautiful, Oliver. How can we not? We got to use that. And so,
awesome.
and it's the same with Troy. Troy sent me one bit. He said, oh, I've done this. He said, there's a bit you're going to throw away. He said, I went nuts and did a bit of a flute solo. And I sort of listened to it and thought,
it's the best part, right?
That's wonderful. Where can I use that? You know, so it's those things that the other musicians bring.
Yeah.
That elevate the project beyond where I imagined it could get to. And that's the thing that I love most about working with other musicians. It's not the fact that they can copy and play what I've roughly played and make it sound clean and better.
Right.
It's the fact that they bring this little sparkle that really good musicians can do.
Yeah.
And so they sort of all ended up how I wanted them to be, but where I wanted them to be. Yeah.
The art and magic of collaboration is shining right through there in that example.
Absolutely. And you know, and I know some people find it hard, you know, being constrained because in a band you obviously have a different viewpoint. You know, bands, everybody works on their bit and they work it together, but on a solo record it's slightly different. But I do work closely with people. They're not just send me that and off they go again and I never see them again. We talk all the time and we chat, and you know, there's a real camaraderie around the record as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you were recently involved with a film soundtrack. What can you tell us about that?
I don't know where it's going to come out yet, but it's I got approached through my management from their management by it's an independent film. It's a director's first film called Diamond Sky, characterization type film based around a couple of young people who live a bit of a fantasy life of being diamond thieves. And it was great. Wow. It was lovely to do. They wrote to me and said, you know, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, send me the film across. And so I got the film and started watching it, and it's an interesting experience writing music for film. I did it for Yendor, the Rodney Matthews film. That's a shorter film. And suddenly you're sort of looking at this and, you know, you're sort of watching a film stripped back. There's no Foley, there's no sound effects, there's no music, you know, there's road noise, there's all the other stuff that's going on. Yeah, and you're trying to go, okay. And so you really have to focus in on the character. And that's what I love about writing, is that you know, having done a lot of rock opera stuff where you're writing to books, you are focusing on the characters and you're going, okay, so he's this type of character. He's got a bit of an edge to him. So what can I do musically? And it's like, okay, if we do that, but then if we actually augment that note and make it pass, we're going to get a bit of an edge. And it was like, okay, that works. And then it cuts to this scene when he sees the girl that he sort of likes. Right. And suddenly this little refrain came, and I sent it to them. I said, look, I've come up with a couple of ideas, and sent it to them. And they just came straight back and said, that's amazing. That has captured those people perfectly. What can you do with this scene? And then we sort of jumped in and out of the film. We worked on the principle that a film sort of has three elements that work together. You've sort of got the dialogue, you've got the imagery, and you've got the music. And those are the three things. And at any one point, you've got one of them taking the dominant part, with a secondary one which is helping, and then the third one is probably lower down at that point. So you'll have bits where the music is just an underscore just coming underneath, filling out the sound. Other bits where the music and the imagery is important, but there's no dialogue. Other bits where you're working, it might be a static scene, but the dialogue is really important, and then the music has to raise the tension. And I said, we talked about the film and said, well, we need to think about, we talked about it like tent poles. we talked about it like, there's bits where the music has got to be a tent pole and actually carry it from one place to another, and there's bits where we've got to be, much less. And so I didn't sort of sit and start writing a film from the beginning and work my way through. You jump around and try and understand the scenes, which was great. And they wanted something quite minimalist at times, which was challenging for someone like me. So it's more subdued than I would have done, than I've done in the past. But then there was other sections where they said, "Oh, we want this here," and they said, "Oh, we want this section where they do this. They go through this museum to steal something. Can you do something that's really underscory and a bit menacing?" And of course, I just went away and wrote something orchestral and sent it to them.
Sounds like a fun film too.
Yeah.
I love the story idea.
And they came back and said, "That wasn't what we expected at all, but it's great. We would never have thought of that." And so there's a couple of these moments in the film where it was a lovely collaborative process where they would sometimes make me strip music back, and there'll be times where I said, "No, you can't do that. You've got to take this bit to way beyond where you think it needs to go."
Oh, nice.
And it was lovely. So we actually ended up, working in the way a band does. You're trying to get the rise, and it's lovely because in the same way with a record where you're always trying to, the song is king. It's not a showboating effort for me. Records, it's the song is king, and in the film it was always the story is king. What helps the story, and so it was. So it's a really interesting thing to do. I think there's a chance there might be another one.
That's awesome.
I'll do at some point. So that was really good fun. Really enjoyed it. And it was an opportunity as well to play with lots of synths and lots of different filter effects and things that I often don't get to play with. So it was different type of project again, and doing that whilst doing the Anam Cara thing was lovely because it was like completely different disciplines to work with. So it was good fun, and as soon as I know where it will be coming out, it'll be I'll let everybody know. But I got invited to the private screening up at BAFTA the other day, which was nice. So I went down to London and got to sit in a very comfy cinema chair.
You got a big thing of popcorn.
I thought that was I didn't think they'd appreciate that so much in BAFTA. I thought that might have been a bit.
That's awesome. Well, we're very excited that we're going to have you as our special guest, not only for performance, not only for fan Q&A, but for both on April 20th. That's going to be noon Pacific US, 3 p.m. Eastern US, and 8 p.m. by that time after the time change in the UK. And folks, if you go to the link that's into the description of this post for drumtalktvbrilliance.com, yes, we feature more than just drummers. Big thing happening in that department really soon. But like tomorrow, we're having Derek Schulman of Gentle Giant. He's going to answer questions not only about the prog scene of the time, but him being the president, CEO, and AR of Polygram Records, Adco Records, Roadrunner Records, what he's doing now with 2+ Music and Entertainment. You'll have a chance to see an exclusive performance by Oliver. We're not even going to ask what he's going to play. We want to be surprised as well, and then have some time to do Q&A. This will be in one of our virtual 3D amphitheaters. We've got 7. I haven't decided which one we're going to use yet, but you don't need special goggles or anything like that. You can access it on your mobile phone, tablet, PC, laptop, and navigate wherever you want to watch the show from. Or if you're old school, like Jeff, our president, you can just click a button and see it in 2D full screen. And we're really excited about that, Oliver. And we'll be in touch, of course, before then. And we've got that sound run through a few days before as well.
Yeah.
Great. Keep us posted. And if you have anything big you want to talk about before that on Yesshift, you're always more than welcome.
Oh, fantastic. I certainly, well, I don't know what I'm going to play yet either. I've got no idea at all.
Well, you've got time.
Yeah, time. With your mountain of available time in the meantime to figure it out. But hang out for a minute with Steve and I so we can compare Seinfeld notes. And folks, thank you so much for following what we do here on Yesshift and Drum Talk TV. And we will see you again soon.